everyone. So as Chris, thank you for the introduction. I'm Josh Limor, VP of Technology and Ecosystem Development at Technicolor. So my job is pretty interesting. My job is to make these new ecosystems exist. What that means is everything from what does it mean to create that content, through what is it to empower the distribution of that content, through what is it to actually consume that content in the home. So my presentation today starts off with funnel cake. How many of you know what funnel cake is? So funnel cake actually is one of my early memories. I remember the smell of the funnel cake. I actually remember being at the fair. The smell would draw the lines of the people. People would line up wanting to get funnel cake. Of course, at a fair, it was also about the rides, these rides going all around me. Beyond that, you had games, you had prizes you could win. You had all the sounds, the lights, people really experiencing everything, right? This was a true memory that I was building. And those memories, for years, when we've been talking about creating marketing experiences, we've been confined to this. We've been confined to a flat world, 2 dimensions. Yes, we dabbled in 3D, but we've really been confined to 2 dimensions and trying to figure out how to create that emotional connection that is our limiting factor. So what do I mean by this? Well, if we look at memory, there's a difference between short-term and long-term memory. Of course, if we're trying to create something that sticks with a brand, we want to be able to affect that long-term memory. But there are also 2 different kinds of long-term memory. You have explicit and implicit. To date, we've really been affecting what we call the priming effect, trying to tie something together to be able to create a connection that made people really draw and connect to the brand. So what do I mean by this? Well, one example would be well-known slogans. Hopefully some of you recognize most of these, all of these, a few of these. But how many of you remember exactly which brand each of these are connected with? So we have this issue, which is we come out with all of these slogans, and they're really memorable, and we attach to them, but we don't necessarily connect to what the logo is or what the brand is. Or we don't have that recency effect of being sure that we know our target market is connecting with our brand. Just one example of how we're affecting priming, but we're not really necessarily getting it. How many of you recognize this guy? Right? A lot of us in the room, because we're about marketing, we know, of course, this is CocaCola. CocaCola started putting Santa Claus out there. And there's a large portion of the population which doesn't remember that this is necessarily connected to Coca-Cola. But take it a step further. How many of you remember what slogan went with this? Refreshing and delicious, right? So now we have different segments, different pieces of our commercial, different pieces of our advertisement, which don't necessarily all connect or work together. So if I were to create a triangle and look at the brand, the icon that I created, and the slogan, ideally we create this connection here, right? Delicious and refreshing to Coca-Cola. Of course, when we think Coca-Cola, we want to think delicious and refreshing. Kind of accomplished getting Santa Claus connected to Coca-Cola, because some of us know that. Didn't really get the other way around. And of course, we want to avoid that at all costs. And Coca-Cola has taken it a step further, right? They realized we don't want to talk about the qualities of the product that we have. Let's try and connect this to emotional memory. If we can affect that priming effect, if you attach the brand itself to an emotion, to a memory, that's an even stronger connection. So tasting the feeling, really bringing that connection to emotion, allows us to then make that brand more powerful. But still, we're only affecting this priming effect. I have to remember that emotion to be able to get that benefit. So now let's talk about immersive. When we talk about immersive content, it's about surrounding every single possible sense that we can, really engaging with the mind of the viewer, really engaging with the mind of the person consuming that content, and ensuring that not only can we affect priming, but we can also affect episodic and semantic memory. The ability to really attach and implant a connection to the consumer, because when you're truly immersed, when you're truly feeling that effect, you are creating a memory. And in creating a memory, you ensure that they always have an attachment to a brand. There are a few different kinds of immersive media that we're talking about, all of them kind of emerging around the same time. First, virtual reality, closing off the entire experience, really surrounding the view. You'll see some examples of that from my colleague Harold when he comes up here. Virtual reality has certain difficulties, but has certain benefits. The ability for you to fully immerse somebody in sound and images obviously creates more attachment to the content itself. You have augmented reality. Augmented reality exists in a few different forms. In this case, what I'm talking about here is it's enhancing your real world. It's a connection, usually informational, that's based around the real world. So we had one significant example of this with Pokemon Go, where successfully they were implanting these virtual objects into the real world, but it wasn't yet real. It wasn't yet tangible. Part of the reason is because the lighting effect around what was being created wasn't realistic enough. So that enters mixed reality. Mixed reality is the ability for you to affect shadows, light, color, together with the real world that the object lives in. This becomes very interesting because it also speaks to a point where we're really starting to blur the lines between reality and the virtual world. What is this real, tangible world versus the virtual world? So to show you some examples of that, I'm going to pull up some of Technicolor's brands. We have a company called The Mill, located in multiple locations around the world, one of them here in the UK. The Mill built this car. Might not look like much, but that car is effectively every car commercial you've ever seen. The reason is, what if you want to release a car commercial for a car that's not yet been built? You have to be able to film it in a certain way that allows you to blend reality into, blend the virtual reality into the reality. So let me show you an example. So what you had there was an example of a real object, a real rig, a real vehicle that effectively can become any vehicle in the world. The reason for this is so that we can capture real light reflections, real color, real reflection of the sky, everything to be able to virtually insert an object that's not really there into a known space. So really you can start to see how these blurred lines really start to exist. You end up having to not just virtually generate it, because sometimes that feels artificial, but actually put something physically into a space and be able to affect it in a way that makes it seem so realistic that most people, hopefully many of you in this room, had no idea that that was a fake car before today. So that was done by the Mill, and they did a piece called The Human Race, which is available to be viewed online. And then let's talk about another company we have called MPC. MPC this year did the John Lewis Christmas commercial. They didn't just do the commercial itself, they also did the virtual experience. They took it a step further and way beyond what a traditional two-dimensional commercial would be. So let me show you an example of that.
You can take off your headset now.
So I like this example because it really shows how you can extend the traditional two-dimensional experience that we've had to date. Not only are they creating a virtual experience, that virtual reality experience then was installed into stores. In stores, they had 11,000 people go through and actually experience that virtual reality, that being part of the commercial, helping to bring up the ability for the people to remember and tangibly connect to the content. They took it a step further, which wasn't just that the person was experiencing it being in the actual trampoline with the animals, but a step beyond that, the people standing in line were able to see the actual person in the experience, not just what they saw. So then it created people wanting to be in the experience. Taking it a step further, they had the social media campaign. Once you actually were in there, you were then able to share that with your friends and draw them into the store. So it wasn't just about watch this commercial, which a lot of people wait for every Christmas. It was really about how do I take this a step further and connect people to that experience. I just like that animal, so I put him in there. But of course, all of this comes with challenges. We have to deal with how do you get people into the headset. You saw, different ways to get people to hold a mask up and make them intrigued by it. But you have to deal with how do you get the content to people? Is it a download experience? Is it a streaming experience? What is the outlet? How do you monetize? I'm not going to give you answers to those questions because the reality is the answers are not there yet. Instead, what we've done is we created a collaborative network of different companies. This includes HP, NVIDIA, AMD, IBM, different companies around the world that allow us to collaborate and deal with these real challenges with virtual reality. Because it's not going to be one company, one pin that makes this work. You have to work together, each solving your own piece of that puzzle to help this ecosystem evolve and be able to create that emotional connection that we're all looking for. So we, in our step, created the Technicolor Experience Center. This is a facility located in Hollywood where not only do we connect the companies I just mentioned, but we connect all of the major studios with those companies. So we worked, for instance, with Fox on the latest Alien VR piece. We've done Passengers with Sony. We are connecting those who are making professional VR content as sidecar marketing pieces for theatrical releases with these major companies to ensure that we tackle those challenges, that people aren't getting sick in the experience, that they actually can enjoy it, and then therefore we can make content that empowers these devices to exist. So Technicolor, you saw some of the examples of our different companies. Technicolor itself is not just a post-production facility. The reason we engage across the community to deal with and solve these challenges is we are an ecosystem company. Chris mentioned you might recognize us at the end of different films or at the end of television shows, but we are also the second largest producer of set-top boxes in the world and the largest producer of gateways in the home. So when we create these new ecosystems, it affects our entire business, as it affects many other businesses. So we create these partnerships to solve those challenges together to make the ecosystem exist so that we can all benefit from it. And thank you very much. That's the end of my presentation. I'm going to hand over to Harold, who's going to talk about some of the work that he's done, and then we'll be around for questions afterwards. So thank you.